Today I scanned my home network, expecting to find maybe 10 or 15 devices, and I actually found 25 with some real vulnerabilities. Today I'm going to show you exactly what I found and how I secured it. I've been recently studying for the Blue Team Level 1 certification, learning about network security and vulnerability scanning, all the things in that nature. And it was really cool to be able to put my theoretical knowledge into action in my own network. Today I'm going to walk you through scanning my network, setting up a new router with actual security controls, segmenting my network so that I can keep my network safe, and fixing vulnerabilities. Let's go ahead and get into it. Made it to Micro Center. A little bit of a rainy day, but we're walking into Micro Center. So happy I did an online order. We got the router. Real excited. Actually now just looking around for fun. Who knows, maybe I'll find something cool I can put in my home lab. Let's look around a little more. We found some switches with PoE. A lot better than the switch I'm going to be using, but I don't have too big of a need for a switch at my place. Hey, there's my switch. Forgot how much I love Micro Center. We've looked around for a bit. I think it's about time to head out and start building. We got the router. Said I'm just gonna have to turn the Wi-Fi off for a couple hours.
How much hours?
Just like 2. I need to fix it so you can be safe. You connected to the Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
You connected your phone to the Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And you connected your TV to the Wi-Fi? Good. Are you connected to the Wi-Fi?
Yes.
You connected your TV to the Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, is your iPad connected to the internet? We're gonna continue going around, making sure all devices are turned on and connected to the Wi-Fi so it can be a part of the nmap scan so we can properly get an inventory of our network as well as any potential vulnerabilities when we try and do a vuln scan as well. Now we got the PlayStation on. IoT is a go. And another device connected to the internet. Another IoT. Opening this bad boy up. All right, I hope you enjoyed that little mini vlog I put together. And if you like that type of content, please drop a comment down below and let me know so I can do more stuff like that. The next part, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the things that I found and how I configured my router. As much as I would love to do this live, I'm going to be going ahead and doing this with screenshots because I need to maintain my operational security. OPSEC. Operations security is the idea that small details that seem harmless on their own can be dangerous when combined. Things like my IP address, my MAC addresses, device names, and overall network layout. Individually, they really don't put together much, but if an attacker gathers a bunch of information about me, they could potentially compromise and get access to things in my network. So I'm going to be showing you sanitized screenshots and talking over them. If you're thinking about making content, always keep in mind the things and information you're putting out there about yourself. You never know the creative ways the attacker can piece together information to hack into your life. In today's video, I double and triple checked to make sure that I didn't give out any information I wasn't okay with. Now let's go ahead and get into the screenshots. All right, so let's go ahead and go through what I did when I went ahead and did this vulnerability scan. We're going to see the things that I found and the remediation that I did. So first things first, we scan the gateway, and we don't have a lot of control over the ISP, which is a big reason why I brought that router over my gateway to the internet, which is a big reason why I bought that router so I could actually do things like segmentation, firewall rules, and things of that nature, so I could have more granular access and control over my network. So the first thing we found in the scan was my printers, and I didn't even know this before. Printers are a pretty vulnerable target, actually, at least in my network. We had the bulk of our vulnerabilities come from our printers. So we first found this Sloris denial of service vulnerability here, which essentially just doesn't allow your printer to work if an attacker is able to exploit this vulnerability. And obviously that compromises the A in the CIA triad. We need that availability. Jet Direct is normal and okay to have open most of the time, but the reason why this can be counted as a vulnerability is that if everyone on the internet has access to this, that means anyone on your network can send print jobs to your printer, which in practice it's typically just fine. But if a attacker was able to remotely compromise one of your devices on your local network, they can send random print jobs to your printer, which can cause a lot of chaos, waste ink, waste paper, and things of that nature. So a lot of the times, depending on where you are, you don't want to let anyone have access to this on your network. So what I did for remediation was I updated the firmware. That's one of the biggest and quick low-hanging fruit things you should always check in your network. Update all of your devices, update your firmware, update your software, update your upgrade your hardware if it's completely outdated. And that's one of the biggest things that will help mitigate and kind of get rid of these vulnerabilities. So we went ahead and updated the firmware for that, which actually patched that vulnerability inside of that printer. And then we moved the printer to the IoT network with a static IP. And I talk more about the reasons why we did that. And then we configured the ACL on the printer to only accept connections from the dedicated print laptop, which is saying here we're going to look at the printer isolation solution that I implemented down below. And then the second printer kind of had some similar problems. It was vulnerable to that Slurus DDoS, or not DDoS, but DOS vulnerability. And it also had a CSRF vulnerability, which is actually very dangerous. So to go ahead and deal with that, I checked if we could update this to get rid of this vulnerability, and we actually were not able to. It was completely up to date, and there was not more we can do about it. It is an older printer as well. So we went ahead and moved the printer to the IoT network and gave that a static IP as well. And then this also had that Jet Direct service exposed, which is pretty typical. And then we configured the ACL on the printer to only accept connections from the dedicated print laptop. Like I said, I'll talk more about in a second here. And then we accepted the residual risk on the CSRF vulnerability because the printer is isolated. So we're going to talk more about what I did there. So since the printer did have that CSRF vulnerability, which was the biggest thing that I felt like was risky and had a higher likelihood of being exploited, I moved both of the printers onto a IoT network with static IPs so that when any other device tries to number one, they're static IPs so that the IP addresses don't change, and we will always be able to know what device is saying what, because if static IPs are configured, that means they're not going to be getting different IPs every time. It will stay the same so that I can set permanent rules for them. So next, I have an old laptop that I kind of told everyone in the house that this is the dedicated printer laptop, and if you want to print anything, you must go over to that laptop and print out your thing. And I created a Windows firewall rule so that the printer can't make outbound connections to the laptop in the case that the printer does actually get compromised, both of them. And then I made it so that only the printer can only accept connections from that laptop. So it's kind of a one-way connection. The printer can't contact anything else, but the laptop can contact the printer for print jobs. And then in that case, that just kind of keeps the printer safe, kind of in its own little bubble from any attackers that would potentially try and compromise that machine based off the vulnerability. Okay. And on the print laptop, yep. When someone needs to print, they need to walk over, yep. Printers are isolated on the IoT network, yep. They cannot be reached by the other VLANs that I created. And then only one device can communicate with the printers that I put on the printer's access control list. The device has no sensitive data. I made sure that that laptop has nothing sensitive on there in the case that somehow, some way an attacker does get to be able to compromise that laptop. And then the printers can initiate connections. Perfect. Just so that obviously it can't speak outside of my network, and it can't even talk to any other devices outside of my internal network. And then defense in depth, we did that network segmentation. We put it on its own network, that IoT network. We configured the ACL on the printer so that only the laptop can communicate with it. Tripped on my words there. We implemented defense in depth because there's a few couple barriers that
an attacker would need to get through if it were able to compromise that laptop or printer. I also made it so that the laptop can't make outbound connections as well outside of our network. And then the trade-off, it is a little less convenient that they have to walk over to the laptop, but I do think it's worth it because of the potential impact it can have. You don't want that printer getting compromised and potentially going around to other IoT devices on that network, or getting to the laptop and then that laptop gets to other IoT devices on the network. And then more secure. And then real world security is about finding those balances. A lot of the times you're not always going to be able to find a perfect solution because you always have to keep in mind the business, not only being as secure as possible. If you're just a nuisance, you're not going to keep your job for very long. You need to be able to keep in mind how you can keep the business running and going without compromising the CIA triad. Next, for the IoT devices in the scan, everything actually looked really good. The smart doorbells were just fine. There was no exposed ports as well. The smart displays and smart speakers were acting, or well, their ports were typical casting ports as expected. Smart TVs doing just fine. And everything else down the list, obviously, besides the printers, were just fine. No odd ports being open and no vulnerabilities found in the vulnerability scan. Then all the IoT devices on the isolated network segment cannot reach the professional or kids networks. And then all the IoT devices assigned static IPs for consistent firewall rule enforcement, which is what I was talking about earlier. And then one thing for the personal devices, we found nothing wrong there. And then the personal devices are on the correct networks. We put those on the kids networks so that those, if anything were to happen there, it's segmented because I can't completely control what websites they're visiting, who's contacting them, things of that nature, but I can keep them away from the professional network that holds more of the valuable information. So one issue we did find with the personal devices, though, is like I was talking about before, that operational security. A lot of the host names were very information rich. They were saying the names of people in the house. They were saying the locations of places in the house and things of that nature. Though it can seem small and harmless at first, like I said before, you got to make sure to keep in mind not to give as much information to an attacker as possible so that you can't be compromised. The more things that the attacker pieces together, the higher chance they have of finding more things about you and making your life hell. And lastly, here for the network segmentation that we did, we created a professional network, a kids network, a IoT network, and a guest network. We created the guest network because we don't know what devices will be connecting to our network and whether they're compromised or not. And we don't want that to jump. If we have everything on the same network, one guest device that could be compromised can compromise all of our devices. So allowing them to be on their own network and not see the other networks is the best and safe choice you should do. Pretty much every network should have a guest network because of that exact reason. IoT, because a lot of the times, I like this one saying that I heard online, there is no S in IoT. A lot of the times IoT devices are made without keeping security in mind, and they have lots of vulnerabilities, which is why you create an IoT network so that whenever anybody does buy a nice little Internet of Things device to maybe turn on their light bulb remotely and things of that nature, it's segmented in case an attacker is able to capitalize on a vulnerability that exists inside one of these. The kids network, kind of the same reason the guest network. I'm not 100% sure what websites they're going to be searching, who they're going to be contacting, and things of that nature. And I want to be able to keep things like the professional network safe because that's more information rich, so that if an attacker does find a way to compromise the kids network, they can't get into these other networks like the IoT guest or especially the professional. Lastly, the professional network. This is our most trusted devices because it's the most information rich. They have the most, I make sure those are the most secure devices. I make sure they're all up to date. I make sure nothing's getting downloaded on there. They have good firewall rules on the actual devices themselves, on the host devices, because these are the most information rich, things like the work computers, and they also have full access to the other networks just to communicate with them or access them just for things like management and things of that nature. So just explaining a little bit here. What internet only means, these can only access the internet and cannot access any of the other devices, and professional can access all of the other ones for things like management and configuring. And then lastly, for the next steps here, we're really looking to doing things with my Raspberry Pi. I'm thinking about creating Pi-hole so that, like I said, we can look more into things that the kids are surfing, keeping them away from blacklisted domains and things of that nature. Implement network monitoring so we could have my home lab to be more of like a SOC environment. And we're going to start implementing regular vulnerability scanning, because seeing the thing like the printer CSRF vulnerability really scared me, because I never thought that I would be able to have such a vulnerability inside of my own network. So we're going to make videos on that soon, so make sure to stay tuned. And let's move on to the next screenshot. Now, getting into the ASUS RT-BE58U configuration screen, I really learned a lot setting up my first router for the first time, and I honestly didn't know that routers were actually so security rich in tools. They actually care a lot about your security. There's a lot of built-in tools. It's kind of like a mini SOC in the box, to be frank with you. Things like AI security solutions, obviously firewalls, there's QoS, traffic analyzing, parental controls for content filtering, a lot of cool things that you can set up and kind of take a peek into your own network security. We're going to look more into it and move on to the next screenshot here. Now, one of the coolest parts about this router, the AI protection, it gives you a router security assessment to find vulnerabilities inside of your router. And then number 2, malicious site blocking, where it can restrict malicious sites to protect from malware, phishing, spam, adware, and ransom attacks, which makes me think, do I even need the Pi-hole I'm thinking about configuring soon here, but it's always good to have defense in depth. Next up, the two-way intrusion prevention system, which protects any device on the network from things like spam or DDoS attacks. It will be able to detect any device that's being affected by a DDoS attack and probably put a block on whatever malicious packets. Here it is, block on whatever malicious incoming packets to protect your router from vulnerability attacks like shell-shocked, heartbleed, Bitcoin mining, and ransomware. This two-way IPS detects on the network level, I'm assuming, suspicious outgoing packets from infected devices and avoids botnet attacks, as well as protects you from infected device prevention. So if your device got compromised and became a part of a botnet to DDoS other machines and hosts and things of that nature, it will be able to automatically detect both of those things, you getting DDoSed or your device becoming a DDoSer, if you want to put it in that way, which is just super cool that your router alone can do this for you. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next screenshot. One of the most important and first steps you should always take when setting up your router, the firmware upgrade. This will always be an amazing thing, because if your router is out of date, which a lot of the times it is, which mine actually was, it was checking here, it actually was out of date, so we went ahead and updated it. This can be one of the biggest things you need to do, because you can actually have an existing vulnerability in your current firmware version. A lot of the times they put out updates literally because there are vulnerabilities inside of your device. So make sure to go to the firmware section and always update any of your devices, not only your router. Now let's move on to the next screenshot. And now for the last screenshot, content filtering. A lot of the times you could find this in parental controls, because it's really helpful for parents to block certain content types they don't want specific devices or networks contacting in their network. Specifically, like in my school, for example, they had this a lot of the times. If you surfed on a website you weren't supposed to, like for example a video game website, it will automatically block that by detecting what type of content that website delivers and things of that nature. Not only that, it can keep you safe by adding rules to kind of block more malicious sites and things of that nature. So if you want to implement content filtering, a lot of the times it will actually be under parental controls. But yeah, it's really crazy how much cool tools that you have that you can implement right in your router to make your router kind of a mini SOC in a box. Now, I hope you enjoyed this little mini walkthrough we had here with the screenshots and the sanitized version of my vulnerability scan. Let's go ahead and get back to the rest of the video. Sorry, one last thing before I wrap up this video. I totally forgot to show the syntax I used to actually run that quick, lightweight vulnerability scan on my network. It's really easy. All you need to do is download nmap on a Linux and I believe actually Windows device and run that scan on your private network. If you're on Linux, you'll go sudo so that you can have the TCP, the raw sockets, nmap-sv for the service versions, the -sc for the default scripts, and then the -- script equal vuln to invoke that NSE nmap script for the vulnerability detection, and then put in your private network range, and then go ahead and save that to a file so you can view it later. And never forget to only run these scans on networks that you have permission to do so, because it is illegal to do vulnerability scans and overall network scans on networks that you don't have explicit permission to do so. Now let's actually go ahead and wrap up this video. This is just the beginning of my home lab. I've still got some other toys I can't wait to set up. I've got this switch that I haven't configured yet. I have a Raspberry Pi that I'll maybe do some detection things with it or some DNS level visibility, and overall there's still lots of content coming for this home lab, so be prepared. If you learned anything from this video, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and check out my personal blog at btoughsecurity.com for a full breakdown of this exact video. Make sure to drop a comment down below letting me know anything that you want me to potentially do in the future, and also tell me if you've scanned your own home network. Did you find anything crazy like I did? I will see you next week, and never forget to be tough.